But let's dive into, achieving what the benefits truly are. And first and foremost one is flexibility, which is one of the main goals of composable solutions is flexibility, being able to swap in and out, being able to pick the right systems that work for your business, all those type of things.
Yeah, we want to avoid lock-in. We don't want to feel like we're locked into something that isn't benefiting our business.
Yeah, and things change, as we said. So things are constantly changing. And so what works for you now might not work for you down the road. So that flexibility, I think, is one of the biggest benefits. The other one is faster time to market. So if you have a bad architecture, when we've seen this in these composable solutions, a bad architecture actually really slows you down because you have to think about all the different components at the same time to make them work together, because there's so many places things can break. There's so many places where things are glued together or they don't connect properly. And so now you can't be faster to market because you can't just launch one part of it, because it's now dependent on the other part. Or it's dependent on another part. When you swap it out, then you realize, oh, this also breaks my other system. So when you try to change something, when you try to roll something out, because there's so many dependencies with bad architecture, you lose that faster time to market. So by having that proper architecture, abstracting it, making it more interoperable, you can more quickly launch things.
And that's why a lot of times when folks are onboarding with us, I'll often try to say, hey, is there a phase one of this that can get out the door that doesn't bring in all the bells and whistles that are all the nice to haves? What are the absolutely must haves? Usually that's a much smaller subset of platforms that we know we can get started on, and then plan for all these other ones to be added. But we don't glue everything together at the beginning because it hasn't been properly orchestrated. So we take the time to properly orchestrate while putting out version one.
Yeah, not only does that get you, faster time to market, it also just changes your mindset about, let's look at one thing and not think about the other one sometimes. And even the planning, like you said, plan the other ones. Don't plan them too much, because if you plan them too much, you might build it in a locked way. Just know it's there and try to kind of build this without thinking about that, and then it won't be connected, it won't be dependent. So it changes the mindset a lot as well. And the next one is reducing costs. So obviously, if you can get to market faster, you're spending less time. Also, you can start to get some results and see how things are working. So they talk about fail fast type of idea, right? So the quicker you can get things out and show that it works, the better. But the quicker you get things out and fail and readjust and correct, the better as well. So you're going to just reduce costs for wasted money. So I've seen people spend hundreds of thousands of dollars, maybe even in the millions, rolling out this big system that takes a very long time, and then to get it live, and within like 3 months, they realize, they have to change a ton of different things. So first off, they didn't get it out fast, so it wasn't fast to market. And now they have to go back to the drawing board and not only change what they did, but they wasted all that time doing all those other things. So their costs just balloon, and that's why these projects are so expensive. So I really push back a lot, even on really large enterprise systems. When they come in with a huge budget, that V1 is a huge budget. I'm like, you should not make your budgets huge. Yes, you can have an overall project budget in the millions if you want on the really large side, but each version should be much smaller than that, so you can iterate and get to market and test and build it in a flexible way.
Yeah, do less with less. Easy. Yeah. Exactly. And then you'll actually achieve more results. Funny, like it's like backwards math in some cases.
Yeah. And then the last one, your platforms will just be way more aligned with your needs, especially if you build them up over time. So you may, add in your CMS or add in your CRM, and then decide, what, with this one, it's working really well. I've tuned it. I've got it all working. Now let's add some marketing automation. What will work really well with that one? What's the role of the marketing automation versus the role of the CRM? How are they tied together? How does the marketing automation tie in with content from the CMS? You can just focus on smaller projects and systems that align more closely with the requirements of the roles you've defined for that component. And that will give you much better results and easier use. So employees like those platforms better, and then they start to learn those platforms better. They use more of the features. It just means those platforms will work better for you, better money spent.
And I think that a lot of the really good platforms, and we've talked about this with commerce platforms. We just had this conversation a few minutes ago, John, about some of the newer commerce platforms are an example of systems that want to work well with others, and that's both from a technology point of view and also from an organizational point of view. And I want to work with platforms that have people in them that are organizationally structured to work together well, that want to be part of this composable system. Sometimes there are some platforms out there that really want to live alone. They just want to do everything and own everything. And if that's kind of the mindset of that organization, I find that it doesn't work well with a composable system. But a lot of sort of more modern platforms they want to work with other systems. They're built to interact, and yet they still they're interoperable and still pretty abstract, which is really cool.
Yeah, 100%. So it kind of ties back to, Vlad's comment about wanting to
Yeah.
see case studies and things like that. We'll add a webinar later this year on that. But the idea here is that, if a composable solution is not done right, it's no better than a non-composable solution. So, you really want that true composability, that term we like to call it, where it's, flexible, you can swap things out, abstract components, faster time, you get all these benefits of faster time to market, reduced costs, more aligned platforms, all these benefits really, really start to shine, but they won't without the proper content architecture. So please, I think there's a big movement on composability out there. A lot of people are jumping on that bandwagon. And I think that's great. And I think there's a ton of benefits. And I think it's going to force systems to be even more composable and more interoperable. But make sure you're slowing down at the very beginning and saying, you know what, it's not just about picking the systems and throwing it into a salad bowl and mixing it up. It's about looking at the different dishes and putting them together in a beautiful meal that kind of comes and supplies everything for you. So I think part of the last point I want to add that's really, really key is your team alignment and the team that you have coming in and working on this project. Who is there somebody on your team that owns the kind of concept of composability and, okay, we're going to pick the system, but how does it work with the rest of the systems? What's its role? You have a lot of different teams that use these different platforms often, and that alignment between those teams to understand what you're trying to do architecturally and what a real composable solution means. They need to understand that, or if they don't understand it, at least the person who's owning it needs to lead that. So I think that's really important to have that. I think you mentioned it on one of the other slides, Joel, that person that kind of owns that content architecture within your organization, not outside. Because if you have it outside, and we've seen this, you hire a consultant or somebody, once that project is done, who maintains it and makes sure that you're keeping the future proofing as you evolve?
And it might be the same person, or it might be someone else on the team that owns the composition and understands, and like, and having that understanding of all the platforms that you use and how they work together. And maybe you've made compromises in some cases. I know we've gone through this where we had, John, we've talked about this a few times, where we moved from, we had a few different tools that we combined into one, and how will those interact, in our sort of workflow. Who sometimes it's a couple of people that kind of know, oh, this is how our CRM works, this is how our market automation works, this is how we're digging into CRM. So having alignment across the team about how will those things work and what your plans are for the future. That's how you can set up the benefits of this, as well as just understanding how they all work. I think there's a lot of sort of mud in the waters about how platforms work sometimes, because what's on the website might not be exactly how it actually works. So knowing the actual ins and outs of not just the technology, but like how the services are provided by these platforms, that's really important for your team to have a good understanding with. And that goes hand in hand with the content architecture.
Yeah, 100%. One thing I'll just add to here that really resonated, Joel, that we talked about earlier today, was just this idea that you have to define the role of every platform. And it's just like your team, right? The team will work well together if they know their job, and everyone else knows what the other person's job is and how they interrupt or how they collaborate. These systems need to collaborate together too. So Keep that in mind. You can kind of run even the values and all these different things from that person about how these systems should work, what they're supposed to do, all those things, and everyone who uses them should understand those as well.